Okay, everyone. Welcome to, I usually say welcome to the Jewish Study Center, and you are welcome to the Jewish Study Center. But this class is actually co-partnered with the Sephardic Heritage International DC. So welcome to both the Sephardic Heritage International and to the Jewish Study Center. I'm the treasurer and the tech director of the Jewish Study Center. As the treasurer, I always tell people that our classes are free. They're all right now on Zoom or webinar. But we do appreciate any donations. If you want to make a donation to the Jewish Study Center, go to our website, www.jewishstudycenter.org, and click on donate, and then it'll allow you to donate through your PayPal account or by credit card or by check. And if you indicate you want to do it by check, it'll give you the address and where to send it. Now, everybody, now I think that's my treasurer business. I'm also tech director. As such, I want to tell you a few technical things. First of all, this program is being recorded. After the recording, both Ephraim Katzir, who is the head of the Sephardic Heritage International, and I will be doing some editing to just basically make sure that the stuff that came before we began is not on the recording. And I will post the recording on YouTube, and I'll send an email to everybody who registered at the Jewish Study Center where the recording is. I may also send more information about today's presentation. Also, this is a webinar, a little different from the Zoom sessions that the Jewish Study Center usually does. So we do want your comments and your questions, and of course you're muted, so you can't speak up and give it, but there's a Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. Put into the Q&A box any question, also any comments. It's not officially a question, but put a comment or a question in there. After the presentation is finished, Mindy Reiser, who is the vice president of the Jewish Study Center, will be managing the Q&A. She'll look at your questions and have some of her own questions, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing is that, of course, the closed captions are on. So if you can't understand me or one of the other speakers, you can look at the closed captions. Presumably that would help you. Okay, at this point, I will turn it over to Ephraim Katzir, who's the head of the Sephardic Heritage Foundation. He'll take it from here.
All right, thank you, Jerry. It's a pleasure to work with the Jewish Study Center again. We'll now receive more opening words from George Abraham, who is on the board of Magen David Sephardic Congregation, which is one of our partners on today's program. George, over to you.
Thank you, Ephraim. My name is George Abraham. I'm a board member at Magen David Sephardic Congregation, which was founded nearly 60 years ago in Montgomery County. It is the heart of Sephardic Jewish life in the DC area. It was born out of the mid-20th century exodus of Jews from Arab and Muslim lands. It became a beacon of hope and unity for families seeking comfort in familiar traditions of prayer, music, and culture. Today, Magen David honors that legacy while continuing to thrive as a vibrant center of community and faith. We have a very diverse group of people from different countries, right from Morocco, from Yemen, from Syria, from many different countries, from Spain. I come from India, so we are a mixed group of people, very rich with Sephardic traditions, and I always invite any of y'all, especially locally, to come and visit us. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, George. We value partnership at Magen David Sephardic Congregation very much. And just say a little bit about Shin DC. But first, one of our board members, Marguerite Adams, is going to say hello.
Hello, thank you all for joining. I'm very excited about this opportunity for Raquel, who's my cousin, to be sharing some valuable information with us. And welcome, and I hope that you will stay with us for some of the recurring sessions for the series. Thank you.
Thank you, Marguerite. Sephardic Heritage International, or SHIN-DC, is a pluralistic 501c3 organization that builds intercultural bridges and understanding while raising awareness of Sephardic and other underrepresented Jewish heritages and the cultures, arts, and history of the Middle East, North Africa, the Iberian Peninsula, Greece, the Balkans, Turkey, and Asia, through a focus on celebrating Sephardic and other underrepresented Jewish heritages and their potential for cross-cultural bridge building. SHIN-DC engages in cultural diplomacy by bringing together diverse communities and working closely with the diplomatic community and the U.S. Congress. The Multicultural Jewish Arts Museum, MJAM, a project of SHIN-DC, will highlight the Jewish culture of African, Asian, and Hispanic communities and their manifestations in the Americas, and is envisioned as part of an effort to combat prejudice of all types, including anti-Semitism. We encourage you to become a member of SHIN-DC or to make a one-time donation for this program by visiting our website at shindc.org. As the arts and humanities are being defunded nationally, we need your support now more than ever. Today's SHIN-DC program is co-hosted with partners Stand With Us, Magen David Sephardic Congregation, Jewish Study Center, Jewish Genealogy Society of Greater Washington, and the National Museum of American Jewish Military History. Part 1 of the Moroccan Jewish Roots series today will cover a new evaluation and analysis of the 5 censuses undertaken at the initiative of philanthropist Sir Moses Montefiore among the Jewish population of the land of Israel between 1839 and 1875. Raquel will tell you more about that. Raquel Levy-Toledano was born in Morocco and currently resides in France, where she received her MD in gynecology and PhD in molecular endocrinology, followed by postdoctoral training at NIH in Washington, where she was an active member of the local Sephardic community. She is a member of Magen David Sephardic Congregation and Sephardic Heritage International, or SHIN-DC. Raquel is a board member of the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies and the Cercle de Généalogie Juive, where she manages the genetic genealogy group, a member of the General Assembly of the International Institute for Jewish Genealogy in Israel, president of Nos Ancêtres Juifs, Moroccan, et Algériens Genealogical Society, and expert curator of Jenny's Moroccan and Algerian Jewish Family Tree, co-administrator of the Avotenu DNA Project section involving North African Jews, and founder of the Généalogie des Juifs Moroccan Facebook group, which has 13,000 members. She has published several articles in Genealogy and other journals and has presented at numerous conferences. After Raquel's presentation, there will be a Q&A, so please enter your questions into the chat as they occur to you, and we will do our best to address them at the end. Over to you, Raquel.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ephraim, for this kind introduction. I'm very pleased and very honored to give you this presentation tonight, and I'm especially thank all the organizers and Magen David Sephardic Congregation. When we first arrived in United States early 90s, we came from France. We were a little bit lost, and Magen David Congregation was kind of an anchor with our past in Morocco. So my first encounter with Montefiore censuses was when I was searching my ancestor in this census, and I found out that there was a wealth of information on Moroccan Jews, especially the Jews that were living in the land of Israel in the 19th century, but not only on Moroccan Jews, but all the Jews that were living there. And I realized that it hasn't been that exploited. So before going into the core of the presentation, let's see what the situation was for Jews in Europe in the 19th century. At the end of the 18th century, Jews were forced to adopt surnames, while before they were using a paternal, traditional way of naming, a son being, let's say, Yaakov ben Abraham, for instance. And from there, it was spread out in all Europe. At the meantime, they started to be granted civil right in France first, and then all over Europe. That led to their emancipation. But this went with some restriction on economic activity. However, that led them to access university, professional occupation, and public life. At that time, the Reform Judaism movement emerged in Germany that probably made some Orthodox Jews in Europe nervous about the future of Judaism, and probably made them look at the land of Israel as a desirable place to be to preserve Judaism. This was along with an integration of Jews in the broader European society, rising of nationalism and economic tension, and of course, anti-Semitism. At the same time, in Muslim countries, Jews were submitted to dhimmi status. So this status was meant to protect them, but it was no less than a second-class citizen status. They had a lot of constraints. They could not dress the way they wanted. Their houses should not be higher than a house of their Muslim neighbors, etc. But they were free to practice Judaism, and they even had some rabbinical court in Muslim countries. In 1830, France invaded Algeria, and in 1870, Jews there could even access to the French nationality thanks to the Crémieux Decree. At the meantime, in Morocco and in Tunisia, Jews were facing periodic persecution and economic restriction. In 1840, the Damascus affair erupted in Damascus, where two men, one Christian and one Muslim, disappeared, and Jews were falsely accused of ritual murder. That created diplomatic tension and protest, and some big figures of European Judaism as Moses Montefiore and Adolphe Crémieux went to the Ottoman authorities, and ultimately the Jews that have been arrested, tortured, and some of them have been murdered, the ones that survived were released, and it was a starting point for a new Jewish solidarity and diplomatic action of Jews. At the end of the 30s and in 1856, the status of dhimmi improved in the Ottoman Empire at such a point that in Turkey, Jews were granted the same right as non-Muslims. That made the Ottoman Empire a desirable place to be for Jews, and especially the land of Israel. Sir Moses Montefiore was born in Livorno to Joseph Montefiore and Raquel Lombroso of Mocata. The couple had emigrated in England before the birth of Moses, and they were there actually living, visiting their family. So Sir Moses Montefiore was a Sephardi. He was a very wealthy Englishman, a diplomat, a philanthropist. He was traveling a lot to defend the cause of oppressed Jews wherever they were. He was extremely religious. He would not travel without his shochet, his ritual slaughter, or without his Torah scroll, so he could practice Judaism everywhere, wherever he was. He married Judith Band Cohen, who was an Ashkenazi Jew, and that was kind of one of the first mixed marriage between an Ashkenazi and a Sephardi in England. That marriage made him closer to the Rothschild family because Judith's sister was married with a member of the Rothschild family, and with them, Moses Montefiore contributed to the emancipation of English Jews. He was a close friend of Queen Victoria, and actually he was even her confidant. He was ennobled by her as a baronet in 1837. He traveled to Israel at numerous occasions, and in bold, the number that you see in bold are the time where he ordered a census. The reason why he did that is mostly to address the needs of the Jews living in the land of Israel, to manage funds and charity. So this is a page of the Montefiore census, and the censuses were initiated after a Sfat earthquake in 1837. You had noticed that probably that Montefiore had traveled to Israel in 1838, and that was when he could witness the damages caused by the earthquake and also the disaster in which the Jews were living. And for him, it was urgent to address the need of these Jews. Each census followed Sir Montefiore's visit to the land of Israel. These censuses took place in 1839, 1849, 55, 66, and 75. So they span about 35 years. And there, Jews were categorized as Ashkenazim or Sephardim according to the neighborhood they lived in, but actually all the non-Ashkenazim Jews were called Sephardim, and that include, of course, Sephardim, but also Mizrahi, Jews from Italy, Jews from the mountain. So in all the analysis that I will show you, when I talk about Sephardim, I'm talking about non-Ashkenazim Jews. Not only Jews individuals were censused, but also all the Jewish institutions of the land of Israel. And I will tell you a little bit about the institutions at the end of my presentation. All the information that are in the Montefiore censuses, and especially the genealogical information, are publicly accessible at the Montefiore Endowment website. So we used a unique methodology by integrating all the censuses and all the data and combining them into a single database. So for each individual, and there were about more than 55,000 entries, we had all the information, demographic information, the place where they live, their age, etc., their occupation, and there were so many occupations that we had to break them down in 4 categories: either intellectual, physical occupation, business, clothing, food, and dependence. We were able to assess their economic status by combining the occupation, their possession, and their earning. And again, we break down the socioeconomic status into 4 categories: very low, low, medium, or high. We had also access to the date of arrival, and that allowed us to look at the pattern of immigration to the land of Israel. And because we combined all the data, we could follow a given individual that throughout the census, we could assess whether or not they continue living in Israel and how long they lived in Israel. So this is the QR code of the article we just published. So if you want to scan it, you'll have direct access to the article, but it's also for me the opportunity to thank Win Penix and Professor Sergio Della Pergola, who is the world expert in Jewish demography, for co-authoring this article with me. So the first thing we noticed is that only 5% of Ashkenazim head of household had a surname, while 90% of Sephardi head of household had a surname. And we were wondering why is that so. The first thing is, as I said earlier, they adopted surnames at the end, Ashkenazim adopted surnames at the end of the 18th century. And perhaps not using that surname in the land of Israel was a way for them to get emancipated from their former rulers. The other reason, as I said also, is that the Ashkenazi that came to the land of Israel were mostly the very religious Orthodox Jews. And as you may know, it is not allowed to be counted as Jews. And perhaps for them, a way to overcome this law was to not use their names. I don't know. But one point to note is that when they participated to the census, they got some money. And as they were extremely poor, that might have been a reason for them to participate to the census. While Sephardi Jews carried their name for centuries already, we could, for instance, go back to Spain. For some families, we could find them in Spain using the same name as in Morocco or in the Ottoman Empire. So they were used to their names, and they were used to report their names. Looking at all censuses, we could count about almost 1,700 different surnames, mostly, of course, Sephardi, while at the end of the censuses in 1875, only half of them were found. So either the men didn't have male descendant and died, or more likely, people left the land of Israel. And that's what I believe, that there was a very rapid turnover of people in the land of Israel. This is just for you to see what are the surnames, the Sephardic surnames that we found, and the most frequent one by order of frequency that we found in 1875. You'll notice that they are totally different in Mizrahi, North African, people from the Ottoman Empire, Israeli, and actually looking at Israeli, they look like there were specific surnames that were used only in Israel. I didn't find them in other Sephardim. This is just to give you an example of what you can find by looking your genealogic information in Montefiore census. I choose the name of Zrien because this is my mother's maiden name, and it's not very common. So perhaps some member of my family could have been in the land of Israel in the 19th century. So I found Yaakov Zriel. He was 45 years old in 1849. He was married to Yakot. He was from Ourika in Morocco, which is a small village not far from Marrakesh. He arrived in 1835 and he was a beggar. And you'll notice that he didn't report the first names of his daughters. In 1855, you can see that now he's a greengrocer, so he grew up in the social scale, and now he gives the name of his two daughters. In 1866, he's probably retired, and he is now one of the Batlanim available for Minyan, but he has a young son, Mordechai, aged of 11, and from there, I didn't find Yaakov anymore. But in 1875, I find Mordechai, and he is now a young adult. He's married. He's a donkey driver's assistant. And in the note, he mentioned that he needs a livelihood and would like agricultural work. So the notes in Montefiore's censuses are extremely interesting and give a lot of information about the people's daily life, some anecdotes, etc. And here, it's like for Mordechai conveying a message to Moses Montefiore, asking him a piece of land to do agricultural work. So that's how we looked at these notes. So talking about demography and looking at the total Jewish population in the land of Israel in the past years, there are not so many reliable information, but I try to look at reliable sources, and that's what I found, that in the early first century, there were probably around 500 to 1,000,000 Jews in the land of Israel. Of course, that population dramatically decreased after the fall of the Second Temple and after the Bar Kokhba revolt. And progressively it decreased until the 10th century at the Islamic period, where there were only about 20 to 50,000 Jews there. And what we know about the Islamic period and the Arab conquest is that when they arrived in Morocco, when the Arab conquest arrived in Morocco, they probably brought some Jews with them from the land of Israel. And we can see that some of the families has probably originated in the land of Israel and had come with the Arab conquest. But the bottom line is that in the 1800s, there were very, very few Jews in the land of Israel. And this is just to give you a graphical visualization of the fall of the Jewish population in the land of Israel through time. In 1800, as you can see, there were very few Jews there, but we were wondering whether with the Montefiore censuses, we would be able to number the Jews, or at least have an approximation of the number of Jews that lived in the land of Israel before the census and before the 19th centuries. So to do so, we looked at the people that were born in Israel before 1900, and that will give us an approximation of people living there before in the 18th century. And actually, that was very small, but we could prove by this data that there were about 2,000 to 3,000 Jews living in the land of Israel in the 18th century. So this is the distribution of the Jews per census and per city. The four biggest cities that were most populated cities were Jerusalem, Sfat, Tiberias, and Hebron. And you see this little emptiness here, that is empty, that this city were not all the time censused. But even more, that circle in blue, there is it looked to us that there were the growth was not correct. The number of people, the growth of the number of people. So we asked Montefiore Endowment, and they confirmed that they lost some of the data of, especially in Sfat and probably in Tiberias, of all the Sephardic Jews. So at the end, the data given by Montefiore censuses were probably underestimated by at least 15 to 20%. And if we look at the estimated Jewish population, you see that there is a growth here, that it is probably not due to natural growth of a population, but that Jews came to the land of Israel in the 19th century. Of course, we knew that by the census, but it was nice to show it. I also wanted to put in perspective the population, the Jewish population in the land of Israel as assessed by the Ottoman census that took place in 1879. So our estimation in 1879 was that there were about 26,000 Jews, mostly in Jerusalem, Sfat, Tiberias, and Hebron. And in the Ottoman census, the number was inferior, most probably because the goal of the census was to trace the people that could pay taxes. So that was not an incentive for Jews to participate to the census, but that gives you also an idea of how the population was composed there. So let's say 26,000 Jews, 14,000 Christian, and the vast majority, 385,000 Muslims. This is another estimation that was done by Ben Aryeh Yehoshua of the Jewish population of Jerusalem. Yehoshua Ben Aryeh wrote this book, Jerusalem, in the 19th century. That is a fantastic book, and all the illustrations that you will see here and there in my presentation come from this book. So, altogether, in 1870, there were about 22,000 souls living in Jerusalem, and Jews represented in 1870 half of that population, as there were 11,000 Jews living in Jerusalem, and that's what the Montefiore census 1875 shows. Now, how were Ashkenazim and Sephardim distributed throughout the census? As you can see, apart from the last census, Sephardim were outnumbering Ashkenazim, and even in 1875, if we add the Sephardim that were not census, that for whom the data has been lost, there were probably more Sephardim in 1875 than Ashkenazim. So looking at the Sephardi population, I just give a breakdown of the population here. About 40% were from the Ottoman Empire, 10% were from the East, were Mizrahi. About 25% were born in Eretz Israel, and about 25% were all from North Africa. If you look at 1875, it has a little bit changed. There were less Ottoman in proportion. There were less people from Ottoman Empire, a little bit more Mizrahi, a bit less from Eretz Israel, because this population, don't forget that the size of the population grew, but the people who were from Israel, they could not, they only had their natural growth, and there were not people coming from abroad to increase that population. While the North African population represented at that time more than a third of Jews that were living, of Sephardim that were living in Israel at that time in 1875. Thanks to the date of arrival that was reported for each individual in the Montefiore census, we could look at the immigration patterns of Jews to the land of Israel. And actually, it was not a continuous immigration, but people came by waves, probably in groups, and probably because either something had happened in their home country or because it was an opportunity to travel with some other people, etc. But what is important to note is that in the beginning of the century, it was mostly Sephardim that came to Israel, and at the end, at the second half of the century, then the Ashkenazim start to come more and more, and the biggest waves was a little bit later, but the first Aliyah of Jews in the land of Israel was long before the so-called 1882 first Aliyah, and it was mostly due to the Aliyah of Sephardic Jews. While at school today in Israel, they learned that the first Aliyah in Israel had occurred in 1882 and was mostly due to Ashkenazim, which you can see is not correct. So where were the people who came to live there or who lived in Israel? Where were they born? This is a census, this data is from the census of 1875. And you see that the most frequent country where they were born is Ukraine, but also the land of Israel itself. And then Morocco, Belarus, and all the countries of the Ottoman Empire, but also people from United States, from Cuba, from India, from Ethiopia, etc. And it seemed to us that anywhere where there was a Jewish community at that time, someone would have gone to the land of Israel, would have immigrated there. So looking at the age of the population, I should say that we also broke down the age in children from until 14 years old, adult and young adult from 14 years old to 50, and above 50, old people. Remember that we are in the 19th century. And what you can see is that the population was rather young. The median age of arrival was 36 years old, and the most frequent age at arrival was 17 years old. So the myth that people would go to the land of Israel old to die there and to be buried there is false. And actually, this population that went to the land of Israel was young. They went there for ideological reason and because they wanted to build a country. As I said, we categorized the occupation of the people. And what was very surprising is to see this result, that 57% of the Ashkenazim had a so-called intellectual occupation. So there was either rabbis or teachers, or even perhaps doctors or lawyers, but mainly had a religious occupation. And if we compare that to Sephardim, where we found that only 1/3 of the Sephardi population had an intellectual occupation. And the reason is probably because, first of all, the mostly religious Ashkenazi people came to the land of Israel. That was one of the reasons why they came, but they're very religious. And second of all, Sephardim that came to the land of Israel were already living in a Muslim Oriental environment where they had an occupation, and people from all classes of the social scale came. When we speak about Sephardim, and so they brought their occupation with them, and they practiced their work as they did in their home country. So there were much more craftsmen that had a physical occupation, etc. Lots of them were involved in business, in food, more at least than Ashkenazim, in business, in food manufacturing, clothing, and there were more dependent people in the Sephardi communities. Looking at the economic status, as I said, we were able to assess the economic status by combining occupation, possession, and earning. And although there were more very low, very poor people in the Sephardic community than in the Ashkenazi, altogether, the vast majority of the population, 70 to 80% of the population, was poor or very poor. Pardon. We looked also at the Sephardim and see whether there were differences. So here in yellow, it's very poor, in gray is poor, medium in orange, and rich in or high in blue. And there were indeed a difference, not so much between Mizrahi people that were from Eretz Israel or North African, but with people from the Ottoman Empire. As you can see, they were more often rich and much less poor. And probably the reason is because the people who came from the Ottoman Empire, they came with their possession, perhaps even with their business, or they left their business. The distance that they had to travel was not very big because they were either from Turkey or from Greece, and perhaps they even had still their business there. So that's how I understood this data. I'll tell you a few words about widows. That's very interesting. There were quite a large number of widows in the land of Israel. About 13% of the total population were widows, more in the Sephardim community. They most often lived in Jerusalem. They arrived in Israel at all ages, but the North African were most of the time younger. Their goal was to do as many mitzvot as possible and to be buried on the Mount of Olives. But I'd like to tell an anecdote that I came across by reading an article of a young teacher of the Alliance Israélite Universelle that lived in Israel at the end of the 19th century. And what he wrote, is that when a widow arrived in the land of Israel, the first thing that she would do is to find a man to adopt. She would cherish that man, she would feed him, give him presents. And the reason was because she wanted that man to say Kaddish when she'll die. She knows that her own family won't be aware that she had passed away. The other thing that she did with the little money that she had, she would buy a cemetery plot. And she would even engrave her tombstone, omitting only the date. And once she had achieved this, she had her plot, and actually even it was already dug. Someone had dug to put the tomb there, etc. She would have a party with her friends, her widow friends, around the place where she would be buried. They will dance and etc. So I find this very moving, this story. About the institution and the social organization, as I said, Montefiore censused also institutions in 1855, in 66 and 75, that were found all over the land of Israel, and there were all kinds of institutions: religious, education, charity, hospitality and care, agriculture. It was the beginning of the agriculture, building society, etc. We also knew from the census, and in this, and they were reported there, the persons that were in charge of these institutions. Most of the time they were volunteers, and their function in the institution. We also had access to their economic resources, so it gives really a lot of information. And by the way, this is not published. We haven't published this yet. So we found that these institutions were reported in every city. Almost 1,000 institutions were reported between 1855 and 1875, taken care by 3,500 individuals. So a lot of people were managing this institution, and in a voluntary basis, and were taking care of others. The institution the most frequent institution were those related to education, religious institution, charity and care, and community. And this is the chart of the institution that we found, and that we could draw from the result between Ashkenazim and Sephardim. As you can see, Ashkenazim have been always been more organized than Sephardim, with more institution. But what is even more was in 1875, there were much more schools for Ashkenazim than for Sephardim. And it's not excluded that Sephardi family would send their children, or their boys mostly, to an Ashkenazi school. But that is the data. That's what the data shows. With regard to the organization of the society, everything was organized around the kollel, around the neighborhood, around the community. They all had their own religious institution with the synagogue, their own Chevra Kadisha, their own ritual bath. And what we could see is that people coming from the same place, or even the same city, would live together. And we could see that because we had access to the ID numbers of people that were censused, and we could see that all the Moroccan had the same very close ID numbers, while Ashkenazim had other, Ashkenazim, let's say, from a given city, they all also had their own very close ID numbers. As I said before, education was taken a big place in this social organization. All young boys, that's what we could see from the census, went to school. Girls didn't go to school. Either they stayed at home, or they went to learn how to sew. And sometimes when the family was very poor, while their brothers would go to school, there would be a servant in a rich family. The Chalukah is a charity system that was financing the Jewish presence in the land of Israel, and that was actually what Moses Montefiore wanted to improve and to organize. The money was either donated by donators or was collected by emissaries in the diaspora, and especially in the country or the city where these people were from. And for instance, we could see that some very small community, let's say the Dutch Jewish community with very few members, were much richer than the Moghrabi or the Moroccan community, for instance. And all that money was distributed by the Kolelim for Shabbat or for the high holidays, or when they were in need of some help. The health system, it seemed to me that it was quite organized, even though it was simple and very rudimentary. Each community had their own physician, pharmacist, their specialist who would draw blood, for instance. It was free of charge. And one interesting notes that we saw in the census is that when a couple was arguing and that the woman would not get what she wanted, she would threaten her husband to go to the British or the German hospital, the two big hospitals at that time in Jerusalem. And why she would do so? Because there, when you were hospitalized in this hospital, you would get Jews were not forced, but they will get pressured to convert to Christianity. And so when a woman would threaten that her husband of that, he would sometimes, most of the time, give up until she's happy and she stayed and not go to the hospital. That was also the beginning of the development of the agriculture, but it was we saw that in 1875. So, in conclusion, the Jewish presence in the land of Israel was before the 19th century. The first immigration waves in the early to mid 19th century was mainly Sephardi, and long before the so-called first Aliyah of 1882. It was essentially an ideological immigration. The people there were extremely poor and dependent on the Jewish diaspora. It was also quite a young population, people that came to build the country. Social groups were organized around the communities, around the Kolelim, which was actually their community of origin. There were numerous institutions with a society that was organized, and all these institutions were mostly dedicated to education and religion. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any question, please do not hesitate.
Okay, this was fascinating, Raquel. Let me encourage people to put any questions they have in the Q&A. You should find that below the screen with Raquel's face and gestures there. Let me start. I'm a sociologist myself, so I have to learn more about the census itself.
Okay.
You may not know this. I don't know who kept records of the records. How were the census takers recruited, and what training did they get?
My guess is that they didn't get a very thorough training, because depending on the person who took the census, I could tell that there were more serious people who would get all the information, and other people who would just get the name and give the coin to the person who participated to the census. but at least it gave the it numbered the population there.
Okay. Now, you alluded to this a little bit in terms of some money changing hands. What was the inducement of people to respond to the questions? Fascinating. Did they come and knock on the door?
Yeah.
Were there communal leaders telling them this is happening? Please participate. Say a little about that.
I don't know. I don't know about the involvement of community leader, but from what I can tell, as I said, there were ID numbers, so I could follow the census taker during his while he was taking the census. So I could see that he was going from door to door. He probably was not expected even, because sometime when he arrived in the census, the woman would say, my husband is traveling, or he will come later, or not everyone was in the house while he was taking the census.
Okay, let me again pose this. In this country, you know, various reasons people don't want to be counted or known. Do you think people were eager to be enumerated? And do you think they gave answers that they thought people wanted or reflected their own reality?
As I said, we had this unique database where we combined everything. And you could see, for example, for the example that I gave, that each time he was consistent in his answers, Jacob's Rien. And for most of the people that we could follow, they were all consistent with their answers. But I believe that, and that was acknowledged by the Montefiore endowment, that about 5% of the people, few percent, didn't want to answer. And probably the richest one, because they were really in need of money. So, and that was the incentive for them to participate, is that they were given a little sum of money for their participation.
I see. Okay, we have an interesting question here.
Okay, let me look at the question. I haven't seen them.
Okay, well, one particular one, I can read it. From Alan Gale. Alan, you're somewhere here, I hope. Because of the poverty of 19th and early 20th century Sephardic Jews in Jerusalem, were they the primary participants as prostitutes and criminals? Well, I leave it to you to respond to that.
Really, from the answers and from the population that I could analyze, this population, even though they were very, at least in the 19th century, later on I don't know, but at least in the 18th century, in the 19th century, I cannot imagine that there would be prostitute or that many prostitutes and criminals, because they were all living together. They were living in open court. They had a room, and most of the time, the court was managed by a rabbi. So they might even not have the opportunity to be criminals.
Okay.
That's what I believe. For me, I can hardly see them as prostitutes or criminals. And they were all living together in their family. When they were, we could see that sometimes the head of household was like 60, and he was living with his children that were not married, or he was living with his children married, or even a widow that was her in-law widow, that daughter-in-law that was widow from her son, from his son. So they were all living together.
Okay, that lead to interesting family
It's
dynamics.
not like you can be anonymous in a city. You were, and there were not so many, but they were so close. You know, the court, the places they lived, etc. That for me they could not have be a criminals or, but they might. I don't know.
Okay, some interesting questions are coming in. Linda Berger, be interesting to know where you're from, but you can drop that in if you like. Okay, what were the languages spoken in the 1800s among the Jewish communities in Eretz Israel? When did people begin to use Hebrew for regular communication and not just for religious practice?
This I don't really know. I'm not a specialist. But the fact that they were living in neighborhood together, I would think that people from the Ottoman Empire would speak either Turkish or Ladino. People from the Ashkenazi would speak Yiddish together, and Moroccan and Maghrebian who were speaking Jewish, Arabic Jew, how do you say, Arabic Jewish dialect, will continue speaking that. Now, there, don't forget, it was ruled by the Ottoman authorities, so they probably had a kind of perhaps Turkish official language. But to answer the question, I can find out when they started to speak Ivrit. I don't really know. Perhaps someone in the audience know, but I would think at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th.
Okay, I want to get to some more questions, but let me put in one of my own. In terms of the Ottoman officials, how did they see the census? Did they think it was a good thing? What use did they make of it? Was there any dialogue with the people who analyzed the census?
My guess is that they were not even aware of it, because we were looking for data to compare our data to what has been published. And the only thing we found was the Ottoman censuses that were not taken very seriously, as far as I can tell. And even what we had access to was a summary. We didn't have access to the source data. So, but my guess is that they were not aware of it.
Okay. Now, the question is here takes us in a little bit more detail about the Damascus affair. This person wants to know, it's Beryl, why the Jews were accused of ritual murder.
Why were they accused of ritual murder in Europe? Because of the law, and that had followed them even in the Ottoman Empire, even in Damascus.
Okay. Again, we're asking you questions that transcend what you are involved in, but there you are. What about relationships between the Sephardi and Ashkenazi families? They lived in particular places. This would be a Sephardi area, this would be an Ashkenazi area. Is that true?
Yes, it's true, but I could see that there were few, but very few, Ashkenazi women marrying a Sephardi man, and vice versa, but very few.
Okay. Now, let me see. There's also accolades to you for what you're doing and appreciation of that.
Thank you.
Now, somebody named Jonathan Zimet
Yes,
asked.
I read that.
Yes, okay. But other people might want to know the origin of the word dimi. Do you have any?
To tell you the truth, I never looked into the meaning of dhimmi in Arabic. But I don't know if he has any clue that his name come from there. from the Dhimi, from the name Dhimi, but I don't believe so.
Okay, Nada Chandler says that he.
Oh, there is also, does he say? Isaac Luria, Moses Cordovero, Haim Vital, okay, Joseph Caro, of course, and Shlomo El-Kabas. Okay.
Okay, so Nada, if you want to say more, Nada, please do. Nada Chandler. She says Hebrew became the language around 1912 through the work of Ezra ben Yehuda.
Yeah, I knew that it was Ben Yehuda, but I didn't know when.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Nada.
Okay. Let's see, folks. Any more questions? Okay, about the liaisons, if you will, but the integration, the business dealings between Ashkenazi and Sephardi and the Muslim communities. Was there a feeling that the Muslims would buy from their own or get services from their own fellow Muslims? And the same thing from the Jews, whether Sephardi or Ashkenazi. What kind of interplay do you think there was?
I cannot tell from what I've seen. I cannot tell. Sorry, I don't have an answer. I don't have any idea.
Yeah. No, people are just, and me, we're just giving you questions that we would be interested in, but you're not professionally working on this. You're doing wonderful things professionally. All right, it's about 10 after 5. And let me then turn to our other colleagues here and see what they want to ask. Ephraim, you may have questions. Jerry, you may have questions, observations. So why don't you have a chance to pose your thoughts?
If I could get in, you see, who am I anyway? I had a question actually. There's a lot of poor people, and how did all these poor people get to Eretz Israel? You know, it costs money to transport and have food and all that kind of stuff.
Perhaps they used all their money to get there, and once they were there, they didn't have any money to live with. But yeah, I agree. What I've seen, especially from people coming from Morocco, is that they came in groups. So because it was safer to travel, most probably, but perhaps also because it was it cost less money to be in a group than on their own.
I think a lot of the people also Ashkenazi groups did. I mean, I don't know if you know Rabbi Shlomo Pereira in Richmond. He publishes every week a one-page announcement about some things from Eretz Israel history, and various groups came. A prominent rabbi would come and bring a lot of his people, but they must have some money to do that. So anyway, okay, that was my big question. George.
Well, all I want to say is, Raquel, thank you so much. It was an amazing and informative thing. I mean, I personally learned a lot. And again,
Thank you.
I mean, most, my last 30 years at Magen David, along with all the Moroccan people, Moroccans being a big majority of the, of the members there, it was great learning some more of the history and all of those things. So thank you.
Thank you for hosting me.
Let me throw in another question. For those people who like to look at original sources, where can we see these documents? Are they in Israel? Are they in Istanbul?
No, they are in England, and they are at Montefiore Endowment. And actually, if you look, if you search someone in the census, then you have a link to the page, the original page written in Hebrew, to the ledger itself. Okay.
They're in Hebrew. The studies are in Hebrew.
Okay, the way it was is when the people who took the census were from Israel. They were writing in Hebrew in a ledger. In, I think it's around 2000 or 2004 or 6, that the Israeli Genealogical Association Society deciphered it and then transformed it in modern Hebrew, in like square letters, and from there in Latin letters. And the main issue that we had is that the spelling of the names in Latin letters for a given individual was not always the same. So we had to make sure that he was not lost when we were doing this longitudinal study for people. We had to look at all the alternate spelling to make sure that we had not lost him because the spelling of his name was not correct.
Okay, so you were saying
After this presentation is over, could you email me with information about how people can find out some more, document, and I'll send it out. When I send an email out to people about where the recording is, I'll also include other information. If you want to include other information that's too much for an email, you can send me that also, and I'll put it on a folder. It'll be available on our website.
Mm-hmm. No, there are two things that if people are interested in this study and in the census, there are two things to know. The website of Montefiore Endowment and the publication that we had published, because there we have all the details. It's 47 pages publication article.
You will send me information about those
I
two
will
things,
send you.
and I will include that. Thank you.
Okay.
that is
Okay.
47 pages around the census, the issues. Is that what it's about?
Yes, around the analysis, the methodology that we used, all the tables that we could get from, all the information that we could get from there, from the census. I didn't show everything. And as I said, the institution is, the part on the institution, we haven't written the article yet.
Look forward to that. I guess
Raquel.
some of these institutions would still have some of their original reports. They've kept them, I hope, over the years.
I don't know, but we had the information from Montefiore census. So we knew who was managing the institution, who was the treasurer, who was teaching there, etc.
Raquel, I just want to say thank you for this fascinating presentation
My
of
pleasure.
little known history. And we're able to learn something more about Sephardic Jews and also about Ashkenazi Jews. And I appreciate that. I just want to say something about the upcoming parts of this series. This is part 1. And maybe Raquel, you can say something about those other 2 parts. I think some people are interested, and one person asked about it. Part 2 is about a Moroccan Jewish genealogical journey, tracing roots through DNA and the paper trail. And part 3 is about the genetic study of Moroccan Jews using the Y chromosome, ancestral origins, and genetic diversity of Moroccan Jews. So I want to say we will share the dates and times with everyone when they're scheduled. But Raquel, you can tell us a bit more about this and also about your journey.
Okay. So my second lecture that will be on my own genealogical search. That's how I got, how could I say, caught by genealogy and by history. It was, you understood that it is not my my main training and activity. And by searching my ancestors, I was able to find out ways of finding them, although there were very few documents in Morocco. Just think about the civil state that was implemented only in 1956. So when you are looking for 19th century ancestors, you don't get a lot of chance to find them unless they were rabbis, or they wrote books, or they wrote contracts or things like that. So that is my second lecture on. And the third lecture on the Y chromosome, I've been working with Adam Brown in Avotenu. You mentioned that. And I'm in charge. I'm mostly interested in Maghrebian Jews, and particularly in Moroccan. And we were able to analyze about 280, I think, Moroccan Jews, and to draw some conclusion on their ancestral origins, where they come from. And everything is about journey, you know.
Raquel, have you had people work with you as research assistants? This is an awful lot of work to go through.
For the article that we wrote, yes, someone was helping me with the data. We worked together, but most of the time, no. I mean, with Avotenu, we are a small team, so that there are people, and otherwise, I'm very passionate with what I'm doing, and doing what I can on my own.
Well, let me also thank you very much. It's been very interesting. I'm really very much into that stuff. That's why I want information about it. Now I'll share it with people.
Okay.
So I really appreciate that. And by the way, George, I didn't mention before, but you're from the congregation Moroccan David. When I first moved to this area, I was davening over there. I was an Ashkenazi member of the congregation, and they even let me duchen with the other Kohanim. One day I came in myself, they wouldn't let me duchen because Ashkenazi Kohanim don't duchen every Saturday like you Sephardim do. But it was a very nice congregation, and I did appreciate. That was 35 years ago. I do appreciate it though.
So we might have met there.
Thank
because
you.
I was in this. I used to go to Magen David as well at the time of Rabbi Casola.
Casola, yep.
Well,
We're a very unique synagogue. We're a very unique synagogue that way.
Yeah.
Even though we are Sephardi, we do have quite a few Ashkenazi who come there and who have been part and parcel of who we are as a people. So yes, that is something that we pride ourselves in. Even though we are a Sephardi synagogue, we do have Ashkenazim members and all of those things. Thank you.
I really like your previous synagogue building that's now Aish Torah, but it's really very nice architecture. There's one room for men and one room for women, but they have equal access to the bima. It's very interesting architecture. I love that.
Yep.
And my daughters. So anyway, I appreciate all that also.
Jerry, before we stop,
Ephraim was talking about. Let me finish this, Mindy. Ephraim was talking about the next in the series, and we'll partner in that also. But the Jewish Study Center has 2 more classes coming up next week or so. On Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, we're going to have a class about the new synagogue songs by cantor Debbie Kachko Gray, who is also the founder of the Women's Cantor Network. And she'll be actually singing some of these songs and teaching people how to sing the songs. It's very interesting. And then 2 weeks from today, I guess, on December 7th, we're going to have a talk about the Kabbalistic aspects of L'chor Dodi by Jay McCrensky, who's a real Kabbalah type guy. should be also very interesting. And we have two other classes that have not been scheduled yet. One about the Jewish justices on the Supreme Court over the years, and one about fertility issues in the Jewish community. And we have others coming, but those two are really in development right now. Mindy, you wanted to say something?
Well, two things. One, Jerry, not everyone will know what dochen means, so that would be good to explain. And Janine Hakim asks, were there specific censuses of the chief rabbis appointed by the Ottoman Empire in places like Safad?
I am not aware of that.
Okay.
They might be,
Well-
but I don't know where they are and if they exist.
Okay, and someone else wants to know if you're aware of the work of Ruth Chernia with Magen David.
I heard that she's in Magen David. I read that she's in Magen David congregations, but I don't know her now.
Okay. All right, folks.
I was in Magen David. I first came to this area in October of 1989, and I was living in Rockville for a while. And that was the closest Orthodox synagogue. It was about 10 blocks, 7 blocks away from where we lived. So for about a year or so, I went there until we moved to Silver Spring. Dochening, of course, is where the Kohanim bless the congregations. And in Ashkenazi Orthodox synagogues, it's done on the high holidays. In Israel, it's done every day, and in Sephardic communities, it's done every Shabbos.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to say thank you again.
Thank
Raquel.
you.
Thank you.
I think it's time to end the program. Until next time, till part 2. We look forward to seeing everyone again. And we'll let people know about what's coming up with Shin DC, including our annual Congressional Holocaust commemoration. All right, so let's thank everyone again.
Thank you.
And thank everyone for coming also. I mean, obviously, most thanks go to Raquel, but also for people with interesting questions and their interest of coming to the class.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Merci
Hope to
beaucoup
see
à
some
tout
of
le
you on
monde.
Wednesday.
All right, merci beaucoup, Raquel, and au revoir, everyone.